Hey everyone, it's Fox from modelmaking.guru and welcome to part 5 of our build of the DeAgostini studio scale Millennium Falcon. Apologies for the long delays. This is fitting in around commissions and my day job and everything else I'm doing at the moment, so time is very precious, so I've not had a lot of chance. Now you remember last time I'd assembled the cockpit and I said I was going to go off and paint the little details. As you can see, I've now done this. Painted some of the small details on the side walls. I've not gone to town. I have to say, before we go anywhere, been looking at the progress on the Millennium Falcon Builders group on Facebook, and my God, some of you guys are awesome. There's people on there like doing major work, customization work on the interior, on the cockpit, replacing the consoles and dashboards, replacing the interiors because they're a bit lackluster from the DeAgostini kit. Holy cow, some of you guys have got some severe talent. I'm so impressed by some of the work I've seen on there. Now, if I had the time, if I wasn't swamped with commissions and my day job and everything else and 1,000 other things, I'd be doing exactly the same. If this is all I had to do in my spare time, I'd be doing exactly the same. Maybe not as good, maybe better, I don't know. I'm not an egotistical person, but I don't, unfortunately. There's two reasons I'm not doing that. One is I just don't have the time. Much as I'd love to, I can't. There isn't time for me to do that. Otherwise, this would go on for years and years and be like 1 million episodes. And also, as I've always said, I'm doing this really for the beginners, for the people who've never made a model before. They're going to get the kit and they're going to put it together as it comes and give it a try painting it. So really, I'm just providing the how-tos, the painting and building for those people. And as such, I'm not going to be doing a lot of customization. Right, anyway, let's stop waffling. Crack on. As I said, I wasn't going to show you how I painted these because it's too small and you wouldn't see anything. I've just added some simple. I'll give you a close-up view. Hang on. Oh, let me stand up. I have to stand up to do close-ups. I hope this is in focus. I've got no way now. I've just added some simple detailing. It's a bit rough and ready, but we're going to be doing washes and stuff to counter that. Now I have also done a quick black wash on there, and that's what I'm going to do now and show you now. So, all I used was, let me get the paints for you, because I've been told you like to see them. We had some Tamiya flat aluminium for the silvery details, and that's not the only silvery colour I'm going to use. I'll go into that later. As I've mentioned before, the base colour is Tamiya German Grey, which is XF63. I used some... See, I didn't prepare for this at all, did I? Typical me. XF23 Light Blue, just for these like little blue areas. Now, this isn't in any way canon at all. I'm just going with what DeAgostini have provided us and looking for complementary colours to their stickers. These side consoles, they're sort of alright. They're almost there, but there's a lot of inconsistencies with canon, with the real thing, if there is such a thing. So I wasn't going all out for accuracy. I'm just making it look interesting. The little blue accent point was Tamiya X14 Sky Blue. It's a really nice bright blue colour. And the khaki colour is, I think, I can't remember exactly what the khaki colour was, but there is a colour called khaki. No, that's not it. Sadly, I can't remember. I think I've put it away. But there is a colour called khaki. But I was just making up colours as I went along. I used a light grey in there as well, which I think was... I think I used a bit of XF77 UN Grey. My vision is so bad at the moment that I can't actually read the smaller text. So we did that. I did do one quick black wash. What I'm going to quickly do first of all is just show you how to do a wash. There are several different types of wash. Now I need to make this clear because I've had to explain this to a few people. There are what most modelers would refer to as a wash, which is using enamel paints, where you wash the paint on, you rub it off while it's drying, and it stays in all the grooves. That's what most modelers refer to as a wash. A second type of wash is using acrylic paints like the Tamiya paints. You add some paint to thinner, so it's very thin. You You brush it over and you leave it. You can't rub it off. It dries so quick, you can't rub it off. It'll just look terrible. It'll go all lumpy and horrible. The only big difference between this and the enamel wash is the enamel wash will kind of come off the surface and collect in all the grooves. And acrylic wash will more likely, well, it will collect in all the grooves, but it will also stain or tint the colour of the flat areas, so it'll add some colour to that as well. The third kind of wash is a pin wash, and you can do this with any kind of paint, and this is where you very carefully get a brush and just place it against an edge and it will feed into the groove and it won't go over the flat surface. That's called a pin wash. And the last one is one I completely made up called a gunk wash, which is where you get oil paint, you slap it all over the surface and you rub it off, and then it colours the surface and it collects in the grooves. So I'll just set those terms there. So when I'm referring to a wash, I'm referring to an acrylic wash, where you paint it on and leave it, you can't rub it off. I've never used enamels for a wash like that. I probably will at some point. I'll also be doing some gunk washes, but we'll explain those as we go along. So, terminology explained. Right, let's crack on. What I'm going to do is I'll just get the bits ready for the wash, and we'll do a flat black wash first. So, back in a moment. Okay, right. What we're going to be doing is a flat black wash to the main deck. You may notice the silver bits here are a bit scrabbly painted. They're not perfect. I've not painted all the little lights yet. The black wash will help smooth that out a little bit, and then we'll be touching it up again. What does a black wash do? The black wash I'm going to do with acrylics basically tints the colour a little bit, darkens it, and collects in some of the grooves and around raised objects to give a shadow. You can see here the difference between this piece, which was German grey and black washed, and the actual floor panel, which is also German grey and hasn't yet been flat washed. That's the effect you get with an acrylic wash. It colours this. If I did it with a yellow, it would make it a lighter colour. If I did it with a blue, it would. You get the idea. It changes it tints the overall piece. It doesn't just collect in the grooves. So, dead simple. I've got myself a little jar. You can use anything. This is just something to make the wash into. I use these little jars because I'll keep it to one side. So I shall put black. Now I know what's in it. All you need is some thinner. You can use any acrylic thinner. Ultimate Airbrush thinner is really quite good. You can actually use that as a thinner. Well, I think you can. I do. But I'm actually today using Tamiya X28 thinner. They're not exactly cheap, but they last a long time. I have heard people using water with Tamiya acrylics. Now, Tamiya acrylics aren't actually fully true acrylics. They're not quite solvent-based paints, but they're not quite acrylics either. So, I don't know. I've used it once, and it does give a kind of grainy effect. So we shall see. So all you need to do to make your wash is get yourself a pipette, because pouring it out is going to be a pain in the bum. Get yourself some of your thinner. And just, you can make as much as you want. I tend to make a whole jar full, because then I'll use a whole jar full. On most models, I'll probably use a jar full of a wash. Now you can make a wash out of any Tamiya paint. Not all to the same level of success. The one I use most often is Smoke, Tamiya Smoke. And we'll be using a lot of that on the hull once we start painting the hull in about a year and a half, when we're all old men and women and so forth. Oh, I forgot to say as well, welcome to any of our American viewers. This kit is now available in the US. I will post up the URL here for our American viewers. So you can have fun with this now as well. So, hello, welcome. Go back and watch the other 4 episodes of this that I've done. This is why I wasn't too fussed about it being a long time between videos, because there are still people starting out. So, anyway. Right, so I have some Tamiya Flat Black XF1. Giving it a darn good shaking. And all I need to do, I should use a pipette, but I don't want to waste one. All I need to do is a quick dot of paint. And that's enough. That might be enough. I'll stand by the back end of the brush. Give it a little stirry. And you have now made your first wash. Now if you want to test it out, get a lid of something. Lid of a glue jar. And just stick it on. See what you think. It might be too dark, it might be too light. Yeah, that'll do. Another thing with the wash to bear in mind is it will actually fade slightly. When it goes on, it'll look quite dark and glossy. When it dries, it'll fade a little bit. Actually, I might put a little bit more thinner in that, just a little bit. If you're not sure if your wash is too thick or too light, err on the side of caution. Use less. And if you need to, you can always apply a second or third coat to darken it. It's easier to put a light coat on and it not be dark enough and add more than it is to put a coat on that's too dark and you're screwed. So, right, let's get this going. So, how do you do a wash? Dead easy. Get yourself a brush. The bigger the better. This is probably a little bit small, but it'll do fine. Bigger the better. Load the brush and slap it on. There is no skill involved in this at all. The only thing to bear in mind is gravity. Gravity will do the work for you. It will pull paint down so that paint collects on flat surfaces and disappears into grooves and channels and does the work for you. But what you'll see, I hope you can see on camera, is there's little patches of darkness and patches of lightness. Also it collects within all these little grooves and it leaves little hairs. Brilliant. Let me just evict this little chap here. Get out. Not welcome. So yeah, you get it'll gather in all the little grooves and collect around things, so it'll give a shadow to any little sticky up details. It will fade as it dries and it might go a bit grainy, but this isn't the last stage anyway. So that is how you do a wash. And why do I do it in a jar? Because I can put that over there, and next time I need a black wash, I have a black wash. So that's that. I'm going to leave that to dry now. Probably take washes can take a while. Oh, there's one other thing as well. Before you put a wash on, if you're using Tamiya paints, always, 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 always do a varnish coat first. Matte varnish, gloss varnish, there's a difference, I'll explain it. The reason you put a varnish coat down first is because if you just do a matte wash over just bare paint, bare acrylic paint, Tamiya paint, more often than not, some of it will come off because you're basically coating it in thinner. It's kind of logical. You're coating paint in thinner, it's going to come off the plastic. So a coat of varnish will protect it. You may still get a bit of paint pickup, but not too much. And if you're doing a heavily weathered vehicle like this, you can cover it with some weathering. So don't worry about that. But yeah, always do a coat of varnish first. If you do a matte varnish, and I did a matte varnish on this, the paint will. A matte varnish is a rough surface. The paint will collect in all the little dimples and bits of orange peel, and you'll get a textured shading effect like this. It's collecting a little bit grainy. If you do a gloss coat, it may do a bit of that, but more often than not, the paint will just run off the gloss coat into all the little grooves. So if you're looking at doing a wash into panel lines and not so much on the flat panel, a gloss coat would be good. If you want to make the surface look filthy, like I do, then yeah, matte coat. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I've used matte coat for years and years and years. I've only just started doing gloss coats. So there you go. Right, I'll go and leave that to dry. What's next? Next we will do the back of the cockpit. So, back in a moment. Okay, right, now we're going to be looking at the back of the cockpit. When you've built the cockpit finally, there'll be an LED lighting unit behind this, and the light will shine through and will illuminate the back console. Now what I'm going to be doing is basically adding some colour to some of these so that when the light shines through, and I can't show you unfortunately because my only light source I could use is filming right now. But basically it will show through with some colours. I've done a bit of it already. Now there's a few ways you can do this. When I first started, somebody had a brilliant idea on the Facebook group of putting a sheet of plastic here and then painting either glass paint or clear paint over it. So I tried that. I got the piece of plastic off a DVD box, the front plastic, and painted it, tried different colours. And it would have worked fine, except, I mean, I glued it down with white PVA glue, and you can see that on the back here. But it was not flat, it was lumpy bumpy, and it didn't really make a difference to me, so I'd abandoned that idea. What I chose instead was just to paint directly onto the back of the sticker. Now to keep everything smooth, I painted all of this, as I'd already got loads of white PVA glue all over it already. And if you're wondering, white PVA glue is just any kind of craft PVA. For a modeler it's indispensable because it dries clear. It's a very, and you can pull things off. It's a good temporary glue. It's also a good glue to glue paper and card and things as well. So if you ever need some, get some. You can get it cheap from Hobbycraft or any kind of craft store. It's really, really good glue. So anyway, I coated all the back here in PVA just to seal the back of the stick, as I didn't want the sticky stuff reacting with the paint. And all I did was paint on directly, but I thinned it slightly. Now you can get specific clear paints. Some guys have been using glass paint. I have to admit, I assume that's a paint designed for painting stained glass. In essence, it's not too different in basic essence to some of Tamiya's clear paints, such as clear green, clear orange. These are basically gloss paints that are semi-transparent, so you can use it to paint clear parts. I've just been painting a Gundam for a client, and this is a great thing to paint the green sensors on the head instead of using the crappy stickers that come with the kit. So unfortunately I didn't have any clear red or clear blue, so what did I do? Very simple. If you remember how we made a wash a minute ago, all I did was I made this. It's a little bit of thinner, and then a tiny amount of Tamiya Sky Blue X14. Done thin enough that I can put it on and it will dry patchy and clear. It's almost like a clear paint. And all I did, was get me sen, a big brush, swill it around a bit to get the, in fact, I'll just give it a shake. That's not a pleasant noise. Get the some off. Now what I'm doing is I'm tipping it so I'm getting the paint on the brush that's mostly thinner. I don't want to get the gunk from the bottom because I don't want to paint on this. I want to just put it's almost like a wash, I suppose. Well, it is a wash really. Dip a little bit on the brush. Just test it. No, it's a bit. I'll put a little bit more thinner in. It's a bit too thick. A little bit more thinner. There you go, my little dropper. It has been sat for a couple of weeks, so give it a swill. Right, so, and all I'm going to do is quite simply, I'm not going to brush it, I'm just going to drop it into there. Hope you can see that. It will collect around the edges, and if it's a bit too much, then it's very easy just to go in and add a little tiny bit of movement with the brush. Now the reason I'm doing this blue is I looked at some of the studio shots, and the lights above the back wall, so basically these ones, do seem to have a blue tinge to them. So I'm not painting them completely blue, they're just a tinge. And that is how you do it. What else have we got? We've got these down here are blue, so I'll do the same with those. I'm not brushing it, I'm just almost placing it in place, because I want it to collect around the edges so it's not just a solid blue colour. Now I've not tried this with the lighting kit because up until now I've been waiting for it to turn up. Episode 6 have just arrived, so I've not tried it with the lighting yet. Now there are some other details. This little bit here is reddy orange colour, so what I might do for this one is use some Tamiya clear orange. So what I'm going to do, get a bit of that and just dot it in. Now the reason I'm using a clear paint is just purely so the light can shine through it. If I just painted it with normal paint you wouldn't see a thing. So the light should shine through. And last but not last, oops, wrong lid, I will add some green. Some clear green. Yeah, if you're doing a Gundam, if you're making Gundam by the way, this clear green is perfect for the front sensors. If you make Bandai Gundam kits, you know they come in with a clear part that includes the sensors on the front. You could just spray it with clear green and you suddenly have clear green eyes. So we've painted those. I've left some white just to make a white light. Got those done. We'll leave those to dry, and hopefully when we put this thing together, the light from behind should give that a little tint, so it's not all just white readouts and dials. So I will put that to one side, and let's think. Right, what is next? Don't know what's next. I'm not actually sure what's next. Tell you what, while I think about it, you watch this amazing transition. What? Got to do something while the paint dries. Right, okay, the wash has had time to dry on the cockpit floor. It's blended in quite nicely. However, bear in mind how dark it looked when you applied it. Compare it to that, it's still not dark enough. That's the thing to bear in mind with the wash. It will look really dark when you apply it, but it will fade as it dries. That's why I was saying it's always best to go in gently with a lighter coat, and you can darken it as necessary. So what I'm going to do now is apply le deuxième coat de paint, as our French cousins wouldn't actually say because they can speak French without sounding like an idiot. So I'm just going to do a second coat, and when this is dried we'll compare it again. So I'll crack on with this while I try and figure out what the hell to film next. Back in a moment. Okay, right, while we're waiting for those to dry, we'll crack on with some of the bits. You can see here I've glued on 3 of these little control sticks. Now there has been quite some controversy over these control sticks. People have them snap on them. But if you're careful, you should be alright. They are a bit fragile. I managed to get the sticker on. It's quite fiddly to get this sticker on, to be honest. Because you have to line up the 4 holes, which is an immense pain in the backside, but I just used a pin stuck through some of the holes at the back to guide it and then wiggled it around a bit. It's not perfect. Once it's stuck, so it's not perfectly lined up, but hey. And we're going to tidy up this white edge, so that should hide it a bit. But what I'm going to do is show you how to stick these things in, or tell you how. I can't actually show you because you wouldn't be able to see anything. I've put the first 3 in, and I've glued these in. This one, and the one at the bottom are just holes through to the back. This one, in the top left corner, is a shallow hole that doesn't go all the way through to the back, because it goes into this pin. So that one, you have to use slightly different glue. What we're going to be using, we'll use some spruce nips. We're going to use some reverse tweezers, so they open up when you push them. A small metal file, filing for the purpose of, and we're going to use some super glue. Now, it's not going to be bog standard super glue you might find down in the DIY shop or home base. I'm going to use super glue that's ideally designed for modelling. There are millions of different ones. I just happen to have some Logic thick, and I've redecanted this, but it's Logic thin. When you're making a model, there are 3 different types of super glue. Or cyanoacrylate glue, you might hear it referred to, or CA glue. Basically, it's super glue. Thick, thin, medium. What's the difference? Thin is very watery and dries like that, dead fast. If you stick 2 pieces together and you haven't had time to adjust them, tough, they're now stuck together. Thick takes longer to dry and allows you some moments to wiggle around pieces if they're not quite fitted. What I basically did was used a mixture of these 2 glues, and I'll explain in a moment. So, you get your 4 little control sticks on this tiny little sprue. For those of you who don't know, this is the sprue, or you might hear it called a tree. The parts along these little pegs called gates. There's all different names. You need to remove it from the gates and from the tree, and then sand it down. So, to do it properly, you'll see people using scissors and knives. To avoid damaging the piece, because it is quite delicate, you don't want to snap it, use some spruce nips. These aren't flat, these are flat edged. Sorry, you can't even see that. These are flat edged, so it's not a curve, it's a nice flat blade. Quite simply, put the spruce nip where you want to go. Now you have to be careful on these, because one end is the flat end, and one end is the end of the stick, and then a small peg like a locating peg. So you have to very carefully make sure you're in the right place and just gently snip, and the piece will come off and fall on the table and you'll be able to find it. I pre-snipped the other end. Okay, so we have our little tiny piece here. We need to file it first just to get the ends nice and smooth. With this one and these two, it's not so much a problem about the end that goes in the hole because it's a hole all the way through. But with that one in the corner, you have to file both ends. So what you want to do, now if anybody out there has made the 1/72 scale fine molds Falcon, you'll know all about sanding tiny parts. Grab it in your reverse tweezers. These are handy because they stay gripped when you're not holding it. You have to squash it together to open the grip. Get your metal file. I use lots of sanding sponges and sanding sticks, but I find metal files the best for tiny parts. And all I'm going to do, and this, apologies if it's out of focus, I've had to zoom in quite a lot, is just very gently, I'm not putting on any pressure at all, I'm just sanding that smooth. Just going to check it, blow on it, get the dust off. Nice and smooth. You won't be able to see that. Now I'm not worried about taking off this silver paint because we're going to repaint these anyway eventually when we come to finishing the cockpit. Now I don't need to worry about the bit of plastic on this end because it's going to go through the hole, but I'll file it anyway. With these tweezers, handy tip is to hold it in place against your finger. They do tend to snap sometimes or pinch and then ping the piece across the carpet, so always kind of anchor it on your finger as well. Just flatten this end down a little bit so it goes in the hole. There we have our piece. Now, be very gentle when you're putting these pieces in. These three are all curved, they're like a dog leg. So they kind of go in the hole like that. There's the stick. And then the dog leg goes in the hole. Just very gently try dry fitting them first, just push them in. If you encounter too much resistance, you can very simply widen the hole a little bit. Just get your hobby knife or your blade, put it in the hole like that, and just very gently, no pressure, just turn it. 1 or 2 turns. That will widen the hole in the sticker, which is probably what's causing the problem. It may also widen the hole in the plastic a bit as well. But there you go. Then, all we're going to do, because this one has a hole that goes all the way through, it's nice and easy. Place it in the hole. Just do a dry fit first to make sure it fits. Doesn't just fall straight out. That's in. Now it's a very loose fit and it would fall out, so I'm going to stick some super glue on. Now the reason I explained about thin and thick super glue earlier on, for these three I'm going to use the thick super glue, and all I'm going to do, quite literally, because these go all the way through to the back, and you can see it, is just dot some super glue in there. You don't need to be careful with this, you're just slapping in the super glue. Don't get too much around this joint because this is where the console sticks into the rest of the cockpit. But it'll just hold it in place. You've got a second or two where you can wiggle it ever so slightly, but that's now glued in place and rock hard. Over the course of an hour or so, it'll set even harder, and after about 24 hours that will be rock hard. Why am I mentioning thin super glue? Thin super glue is handy for this one, this top left one, because the hole doesn't go all the way through the console. It's just a little sort of pit, so you can't glue it from behind. So with this one, what you will do is get a piece of plastic or just something you can put it on, put a little dot of the super glue on it, onto the surface, pick up your piece either in your fingers or in tweezers if you can, and just dip the end that's going in the hole into the super glue and then place it in the hole. It should then be enough to glue it in place. You don't need a lot of super glue, you don't need to splodge it on. I was using, for my super glue, I was using my Tamiya tape roll. I quite simply just put a little dot of super glue, got my piece, let's pretend this cocktail stick is the piece, got my piece, just gently dipped it in the end and then placed it in the hole, held it for a second, let go, it's in, done. And that's it. So now we have our control sticks. No fuss, no muss, no crying, no snapping, just be gentle. Now what we're going to do about this edge, as you can see you've got the white edge of the sticker. Well, that's really simple. Let me just let this glue dry for a minute, and when we come back we'll sort that edge out. Okie dokie, we are back. Right, okay, let's get this edge sorted out. So I've got this horrendous white edge where the decal is, or the sticker I should say. Nice and simple to fix. Get yourself a small brush. Ideally something not with a point, but with a slightly flatter head. This has just been trimmed with a knife to give it a slightly flatter head. Get yourself your paint. In this case I'm using German Grey, Tamiya XF63 German Grey. We painted the rest of the cockpit with. I tend to do it from the lid, because that's where you'll get the best mixed paint. Tiny amount on your brush, and it's not often you see me doing painting, so make the most of this. Tiny amount on your brush. Get the brush at 90 degrees to the angle. Don't do it down like this, because you'll get everywhere. 90 degrees, and use the edge of the brush just to apply the paint. You might go onto the back of the console a bit. That's fine, we're going to be weathering this anyway, so that'll be hidden. And all you're doing is, like I say, 90 degrees, so like that, not like that. And don't use the tip of the brush, use the bit behind the tip. Very gently run it along the edge. And you didn't see any of that. I'm zoomed in and I don't know where the camera is, so we'll do that once more. So here you go, here's the edge. Tiny amount of paint. 90 degrees, and just very gently run it along. Don't dab it, just run it. The paint will do the work for you. So I'll go around and finish the rest of that. When we come back, we'll see how that wash is done on the floor of the cockpit. So, back in a moment. Right, last bit for today. This episode's gone on longer than I thought. I was hoping to get the cockpit done by today, but that's clearly not going to happen. Last bit today, we're going to add some dust and dirt to the cockpit. Now, there's a few ways you could do this. You could use oil paints, which I absolutely adore, but they take forever to dry, and you have to avoid mixing colours, and it gets very complicated. So for the sake of this, I'm going to show you Tamiya Weathering pastels. They're very similar to normal artist pastels. If you go into an art shop and buy some pastels, you can grind them up with a blade or some sandpaper and make a powder, and that's your weathering pastels right there. Tamiya do them in preset colours, and I've used them a million times, so I know what I'm doing with these. But what we're aiming to do is just add some dustiness and some dirtiness. I'm going to use, you can't see because of the light, we're going to use some of their sand, light sand and mud. I'll probably just use mud. We've got burnt blue, burnt red and oil stain. I'm only going to use oil stain on this one. And this one, yellow, green and grey. Grey is the brilliant one that I like to use because it's a perfect complementary colour for German grey, even though there's no German grey on here now because it's been washed. The black wash on here has coloured it quite nicely. It's not exactly a perfect match, but it's close enough for me. I think another wash would actually make it too dark, so I'm not going to risk that. Also, I must stop banging the camera with my head. Okay, pastels, dead simple. What should we do first? First of all, let us do some oil stains. This is just to darken, to add some darkness. Now when you get the pastel, it's like a little block of colour. Just get your knife or a cocktail stick or whatever you want to use, doesn't really matter. Just gently scrape it so you get some powder coming up. And you can use either the sponge or the brush. I'm going to use the sponge for this. Now I'm wearing gloves as well because this will get everywhere. Once it's on your fingers, it's on your fingers. But when it goes on the surface, you can easily smudge it off with your fingers and you'll get fingerprints everywhere. So whenever you do pastels, wear gloves just to, more than anything else, just to avoid getting fingerprints. So we shall get some of this on the sponge. Just dab it in. And quite simply dab it on. You don't have to think about it too much. Ooh. just slap it on. I'm going to dip it into the corners, and it should just slightly darken the corners. You probably won't see it on camera. I can hardly see it here, but I know it's there. I'm going to do it in the corner here, just so the bottom of this centre console is darker. This is not really a darker colour, it's more of a, well, it's an oil stain colour, so it's more just slightly filthy and grubby. I'll do it around the corners where panels meet. And we'll just randomly dot it around. It breaks up the colour on the floor. Now don't worry if you're getting patchiness, because you can work it with the sponge, and when you varnish this, when you matte varnish it, or gloss varnish it, however you want to do it, it will actually fade slightly because the pigment will ever so slightly dissolve into the varnish, so it will become more subtle. What you often find is you'll put a pastel on, varnish it, and then think you've not put any pastel on it, you have to put more pastel on it and do a second coat. So this is a nice oily colour. It's kind of a oily mushroom colour. Get the corner where the schmutz will build up. Okay, that's that. Now we will add some mud. I like mud. So it's exactly the same principle. Scrape some up. Get it on yon sponge. And this is going to be, again, in corners, just where it would accumulate. This will be a more obvious colour. You'll see this more clearly. Where people's feet would be. It's just a sandy colour. It doesn't have to represent mud. Again, you can scrub it with your finger, with your gloves on, just to smooth it out. Like I've got a big dot in there. Now it will blend away when you varnish it, so don't worry if you think you've put too much on. If you've lightened things too much, you can smudge it with your finger, just to blend it, just to work it around. Be a lot of foot traffic in the doorway, so I'll put some more there. It's probably a bit more weather than I need, but hey, it's all good, dirty, filthy fun. If you want to as well, you can get yourself a cotton bud and just scrub it. If you get any obvious marks, just use your finger or a cotton bud just to scrub it slightly and blend it. Hope you can see all this. I'm not doing the chairs because I already did the chairs. The chairs are already done. And that's really pastels. And then what you can do, although I might not do it, I was going to use the grey to go over the edges, but I've got more things to paint anyway, and I can probably do that with some German grey highlight oil paint, although I might do that last once I've done all the other. Actually no, let's do it now. Let's stop mithering and just do it so I can show you the effect. So if I can get this thing out, get these out of the way. So this is isn't going to be dabbed, it's just a highlight colour. So I'm very gently just going to run it over the edges. If you've got, say, a German grey or dark blue grey thing to work on, you can use it to blend the colour out and lighten it and make it more subtle as well. Now this will disappear when I varnish it, so I'm going to get a bit more handy with this, I think. I'll just work it around some of these edges. Again, I'm going at like 45 degrees to the angle, the edge that I'm working on. Now it's going over these metallic bits, but we're going to rework on those anyway, so that's not a problem. Just gently dab it on the floor in places, lighten it in patches, and then I can scrub it with the cotton bud. I want it lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. So where I've added darkness at the bottom, I can use this to lighten the top to make the bottom darkness more contrasted. Again, this might not come out on camera, so apologies if not. Use my finger because it's bigger. And that is all I'm doing. Just to scruff it up. Now it looks, as I say, it looks rough and ready now. It looks a bit bitty, bit lumpy, but once I've varnished it, a lot of that will blend away anyway, and I may even have to do a second coat or second course of pastels. So I'm not bothered that there are little edges here and there and patches, because that will blend in, and I can always do more. So I'll have to go off and do the rest of it now. When that's done, I'm going to give it a coat of matte varnish. I'm using Humber Oil Spray Acrylic 49 matte varnish. You just hold it about 30 centimetres away from the piece and just very lightly mist it, hardly any at all, and that will seal the pastels in. If you just left this as pastels and then touched it, they'd all come off on your finger and you'd put fingerprints in. So always varnish once you've finished, and then anything, because I'll maybe do some more oils, and I've got more to paint on here anyway, so I need to seal those pastels in, so I will matte varnish them. Also makes the where this dial is here as well, it actually makes a nice little contrast. Looks much better in real life than it does on camera. I can see that from here. So I'll go away and do the rest of this. So, a bit of a rushed episode, so apologies, I'm talking 10 to the dozen. But tune in next time and we'll hopefully get this cockpit finished. So, as always, adios amoebas!